2001 Ford Explorer XLS apparently. And what we're going to do is put new tie rod ends on it. And that would be that bar right there. That ball joint in it. It's kind of loose. So I guess we're going to put new ones, one on each side, and we're going to lower or replace the lower ball joint on this one as well. Okay, and so again, this is what we're taking off. It's this piece right here. And you can see by looking in there how rusty it is. Now this thing shouldn't peel down at all. It should be sealed against the other part and full of grease, and it doesn't look like there's been any grease in there in a while. So, time to replace it. So, I have to loosen this nut off here. I'm going to take some measurements here just so we can try and keep it in the same place, and usually the best way to take a measurement is to count the teeth of the threads that are left here and try to have the exact same thing again, or the amount of turns that it takes to take it off and put the other one back on with the same amount of turns. Anyway, we're going to give it a shot. It will still need a front end alignment even though we got it close. Okay, we remove the castle nut and the cotter key from the bottom here. And the way to remove this tie rod end from its holder is if you take a good solid hammer and you hit it really hard right here, they usually pop right off, these things here. But where this is so old anyway, and I don't really want to save it, I think I'm just going to pound on the bottom of it and drive it out. So if it even messes with the threads at all, it makes no difference to me because it's garbage. So that's how you can take the old ones out. Okay, so I took a wrench and I put it on there and I hit it with the hammer and loosened it off. So now the tie rod end is actually ready to come out. So I'm just going to spin it off like this. And that's going to tell me where to stop when I put the other one on, because they should be identical. And that'll mean that it's at least close to being in the right location. So that's off. Okay, so this is the new part that we're going to put back on. And again, it's just got to screw into place like this. That's all you got to do with it. Just screw it all the way in. There we go. Now, that should be perfect right there. I shouldn't have to do anything with that except get a front end alignment. Now, they also gave me some parts. A cotter key, a new castle nut. Now, this grease fitting actually goes in the top here. It's nice having grease fittings on these things because then you can grease them. That old one down there doesn't have a grease fitting on the top, so you could never grease it. But you could take a needle greaser that hooks up to the grease gun. I'll actually show you what that looks like. And amongst all my stuff that I have going on, I also make doing repairs on my kitchen. I have it all tore apart. Anyway, that's a grease fitting with a needle on the end, and you just puncture the rubber and you can actually put grease inside there, and that actually helps to preserve the anything for that matter that doesn't have a grease fitting. As long as you get the rubbers on there, you can just puncture it with a needle and add grease to it to actually save it, make it last a little longer. So anyway, I'm going to get this back together here. Actually, I can't put this back together. I have to now take this apart here because I need to replace that ball joint right there. So I'm going to pull this all apart. I have to take the axle out, pull that big nut out of there and drive all that through, pull all this off so that I have a place to work. Then I'll show you some more. Okay, so to pull the caliper off, we just take the bolt out of here, one out of there and one out of the bottom and the back, and then that should slide right out of there. Sometimes you can take a screwdriver and open them up inside so that you've got a little more space. Doesn't matter. Either way it's going to come out. When you put it back together, if you can't get it back together, you get a C-clamp with a block or an old brake pad and you put it on there and you just squeeze that together to push the pistons back in. Be sure to open up your cap on your reservoir first. And now I'm going to get a piece of wire and stick it through there and hang it up in the back. And when you're working on your vehicle, don't trust a hydraulic jack. Put a jack underneath it or something. I've got a tire there. That will help. It won't go right to the ground if the hydraulic jack decides to let go. And jack stands are really nice. They work good. Okay, now just to lighten my load, I'm removing the bracket for the bolt in the back right there. That holds the caliper in place. Just going to take that out of there. Set that aside. And I'm going to take the rotor off as well. Set that aside. And that'll just make this lighter and easier to work with. That's all. I'm pretty sure you could probably do all this work without removing all this stuff, but I'm going to take it off anyway, just to lighten my load. Now we're going to take the nut off the bottom here of the ball joint, and we're going to separate this, and we're going to be able to pull this apart here. Okay, it appears that I'm going to have to pull this off, this cable right here. And we're going to take this bolt out here, and we're going to slide this out of here, so that'll be able to remove that whole unit right there. Okay, so now we got the top part all unhooked. Now the bottom part should slide right out, and we should be able to get the axle out of there. So I'll give you another shot when it's out. There we go, all apart. Now I'm going to work on this thing right here. We're going to beat that sucker out of there. That's next. Okay, now we have a snap ring right here that we have to take out of here. It just opens up and comes off this piece here, and then what we're going to do is pound that piece out of there and then tailor it from the bottom, put the other one back in through the bottom, one step at a time, and you'll see how it goes. Okay, so get yourself a pair of snap ring pliers. Look like that. These ones have interchangeable ends. You stick that in the hole and open them up, and it just pops right out. There you go. Now we're going to drive that out of there. Okay, take the grease fitting off. Save it. You never know, you might need it on the next one. Don't destroy it. There you go, that's all it takes to take it off. Okay, so we got the ball joint back in. All I did was I pushed it in with my fingers as far as I could. I put the castle nut on, and I just tapped it with a brass hammer, and it went right up into place. Now I got my snap ring on in place, and then we're going to hook everything back up again. Okay, we got the axle back in place just by prying it in. Got the top ball joint back in place. Jacked up the jack, held that in place, and it slid right in. Now all I got to do is put the bolt in place and look through the hole, make sure that the indentation that is on the shaft goes through, and then you know you can set your bolt in there. That's the next step. Okay, got it back together there. Cotter keys in place, bolts in place. Now we're going to hook up the cable here. That's for the ABS brakes. Okay, now we're putting the
Don will pay balance upon my return. Currently in brick.
Okay, now we're putting it back together. We got the rotor in place, and then we're going to put the bracket on for the caliper and put the bolts in the back. There we go. Caliper's all on in place. Bolts are tight, top and bottom. Bracket's all tight. Rotor's on. Now we're going to put the tie rod end in place and tighten this nut. Okay, so we got everything all back together. Right on! Auto keys are in place. Now we got to tighten this here up. This here needs 150 foot-pounds of pressure. So I'll have to go get my torque wrench. There we go, all back together and working good.